In the annals of psychological and spiritual exploration, few journeys rival that of Carl Jung and his creation of the Red Book. Hidden away for over 50 years after his death, this work was not a treatise on theory or a scientific manual. It was a sacred record of one man's descent into the deepest layers of the human psyche. But more importantly, it was a map for anyone daring enough to follow. The rift that changed everything. Carl Jung's transformation began the day he walked away from his mentor and father figure, Sigmund Freud. Their relationship had once been rooted in admiration and shared purpose. Freud considered Jung his intellectual heir, someone who would carry the torch of psychoanalysis into a new era. But Jung saw beyond Freud's theories, beyond trauma, repression, and childhood wounds. He sensed something deeper and more elusive stirring within himself, the soul. When Jung shared these intuitions, Freud recoiled. The rift was inevitable. Freud wanted science, Jung pursued spirit. What followed was not merely professional fallout, but a collapse of Jung's internal world. This breakdown marked the beginning of his confrontation with the unconscious, a descent into the psyche. Jung withdrew from public life. He stopped seeing patients and retreated to the quiet of his home near Lake Zurich. Alone with his thoughts, he began to experience a flood of visions and dreams that bordered on madness. Apocalyptic imagery, rivers of blood, and mythic beings visited him in waking life. Most would have recoiled in fear or medicated such experiences away. But Jung did something radical. He leaned in. He let go of everything he thought he knew, every theory, every academic pretense, and began listening. He called this process active imagination, an intentional dialogue with the unconscious. And as he wrote, he didn't just record thoughts. He transcribed encounters. These weren't mere fantasies. They were psychic realities, living symbols and archetypes bursting from the depths, creating the Red Book. What emerged from this period was a tome Jung titled Liber Novus, or The New Book. The world would come to know it simply as the Red Book. Bound in blood-red leather, written in Gothic calligraphy, and adorned with surreal symbolic art, it resembles scripture more than psychology. It was not meant to explain the unconscious. It was meant to enter it. The Red Book isn't a guidebook or a treatise. It's an initiation. For Jung, it was his descent, a passage through hell, shadow, and ultimately, rebirth. He later confessed, "I had to become a sick man. I had to become insane. Only then could I find something real." The shadow within. As Jung sank deeper, he encountered visions that shattered his identity. He met a serpent that whispered truths, a prophetess named Salome, and a winged spiritual guide named Philemon. Each figure carried a message, some terrifying, some illuminating. But more importantly, they confronted Jung with parts of himself he had buried. This is the essence of what Jung called the shadow, the unlived life, the emotions we repress, the parts of ourselves we're too ashamed to acknowledge. Rage, desire, jealousy, and ambition. These are not evils to destroy, but energies to integrate. Jung famously wrote, "The shadow is 90% pure gold. It contains not just our darkness, but our truth and our power. And the more we ignore it, the more it haunts us, projected onto others, manifesting in relationships, and distorting our reality." Myth and the language of the soul. The Red Book also marked Jung's evolution from psychologist to mystic. He realized that the soul doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in myth, in symbols, in dreams. Religious imagery, Christ the cross, the serpent, the cosmic womb, appeared in his visions not as dogma, but as psychological truths. These were not historical artifacts. They were alive within the human psyche. In one vision, Jung meets Salome, the mythical seductress of Christian lore, not as evil, but as blind and compassionate. She tells him, "I love you," stunning him. To receive love from a shadowed feminine figure shook Jung's core. It wasn't lust or temptation, it was integration. The soul demands not obedience, but authenticity, surrender to the feminine. Jung's journey was not a conquest of the unconscious, but a surrender to it. The feminine, as represented by Salome and other inner figures, was not something to master, but to honor. He discovered that the soul is feminine. It arrives not through willpower, but through grief, silence, and surrender. In a world obsessed with achievement and control, this lesson remains deeply countercultural. Most people chase success, clarity, and validation, but the soul asks for presence, truth, and humility. Do not become what they want you to be, Philemon told Jung. Become what your soul already is. Ego, death, and rebirth. As his journey continued, Jung experienced the ultimate psychological trial. Ego death. Not metaphorically, but experientially. He let go of his identity, the doctor, the thinker, the father, and entered a state he called being nothing. He relinquished all ambition, status, and narrative. This wasn't despair. It was freedom. The ego, once on the throne, now became a servant to something deeper, the self. In Jungian psychology, the self is the totality of our being, the union of conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, light and shadow. This transformation wasn't easy. Ego death feels like madness. It feels like floating in darkness, like everything falling apart. But beyond that collapse lies something truer. The soul doesn't want your perfection. It wants your surrender. The soul speaks softly. In the final chapters of the Red Book, Jung's experiences shift from chaotic visions to gentle dialogues with his soul. No longer wrestling with demons or shadowy figures, he begins speaking with the part of himself that had been waiting all along, the soul that cries silently in the night, that aches for meaning even when life seems successful. The soul, Jung learned, is not a possession. It's not something you earn through enlightenment or discipline. It is a presence. And to meet it, you must first be willing to fall apart. Why he hid it. Despite its depth and significance, Jung never published the Red Book during his lifetime. He feared misunderstanding. The scientific community valued reason, not visions. Even his closest students might have walked away if they had seen the bleeding serpents, cosmic wombs, and conversations with inner spirits. So he locked it away. He continued his public work, writing books, giving lectures, building the foundation of analytical psychology. But behind all of it sat the Red Book, untouched, waiting for a world that might finally be ready to receive it. The Red Book as mirror. Today, the Red Book is not just a biography, it's a mirror. It invites readers not to analyze, but to enter, not to admire Jung's courage, but to find their own. Because the descent he undertook is one that awaits us all. We all carry a shadow. We all have unlived parts of ourselves, grief we haven't processed, rage we've buried, love we've denied. And every time we feel anxious, lost, or disconnected, it's the soul knocking, whispering, "What will you do with it?" Beginning your descent, you don't need a red leather book to begin. You just need silence. You need to ask, what am I avoiding? What truth do I already know but refuse to face? What part of me needs to die so something real can live? This is individuation, not self-improvement, but self-becoming. Not escape, but homecoming. Jung's descent shows us that the real enemy is not the world or others. It's the part of ourselves we never confront. And healing doesn't happen by bypassing the darkness, but by walking through it. Let it break you open. Let it show you the truth you've buried beneath roles, expectations, and performance. Because beyond the fear, beyond the silence, beyond the ego, there's someone waiting. You,